I'd had enough and I was just done.
I had enough and I was done.
I walked in and I told my boss, I quit.
I walked in, I quit.
And why?
Why not? Why not?
We could do this. We could do this better.
Do things that scare you.
I felt alive all of a sudden, and it was amazing.
The Go Hunt Life Show, hosted by Todd Nevins.
Hello, this is Todd Nevins, and I interview people that had seemingly normal lives and careers going, but they pulled the ripcord to epically reinvent themselves in order to pursue a life full of purpose and passion. This episode is sponsored by PrintDirtCheap.com. Jeff Chrisman, the founder of Print Dirt Cheap, and the crew there are rock stars when it comes to delivering top-quality printing at a cheap price. If you've met me in the last 3 years and I handed you a business card, it was printed by Print Dirt Cheap. They're my online digital printing company for everything. They do banners, company letterhead, a ton of direct mail pieces, funky decals, even menus for restaurants, over 30 categories of printing products, and yes, business cards. And they do it fast and they do it cheap. Jeff has streamlined every little aspect of the business to provide the perfect user experience, delivering the best product in the industry. I have personally been to the offices and I have seen it firsthand. But see for yourself. Go to printdirtcheap.com and use promo code GoHuntLife and get $10 off of your order. Or if you want to get a sample of their work, click on Sample Pack and they'll mail you one out for free. Go to printdirtcheap.com, use promo code GoHuntLife for $10 off of your next print job. This episode is also sponsored by one of my companies, Click Placement. We are a pay-per-click marketing agency specializing in PPC badassery. We have literally helped hundreds of companies over the last decade drive engagement through paid search advertising using Google AdWords and Bing Ads, LinkedIn, and of course, Facebook. We work with startups, established businesses, and nonprofits to customize campaigns to drive sales or leads, build brand awareness, sell products, or generate mobile app downloads. Hit us up at clickplacement.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn to start a conversation.
The world record for climbing Bali's 3 largest volcanoes back to back to back, it was at 19 hours, and we said we were going to do it in 15 hours. So there's 3 volcanoes. Most of them are between 10 and 12,000 feet tall. We started in the middle of the night with the first one. So the first one's all in the dark. The second one's totally exposed in the blazing sun, and the third one is in the rainforest, and it was raining. And so there's actually this really interesting thing that happened. We arrive at the bottom of the first mountain at midnight, and it's a temple where the trailhead is. This is the main temple of Bali, the biggest. They call it the Mother Temple. And as our guides arrive, because it's an active volcano, so you have to have the guides. We walk around the back of the temple, and there are 10,000 people already on the trail. There's a huge line to get on the trail. These are grandmothers and babies and priests carrying chickens and pigs and goats and all kinds of things, because what they're doing is they're going to the top of the volcano to have a ceremony to start rainy season. And this is like a secret thing that even our guides who are locals, they had no idea this was happening on this night.
That was Derek Loudermilk, and we will get to him in a second. But first, if you like the show and you'd like to support it, go to our Patreon page and you'll see a cool video of me talking about the history of the Go Hunt Life podcast and what it means to be a patron and how supporting the show can keep us going here. Thank you very much. You can also get behind the scenes videos on what happens right before and right after I hit record when I'm interviewing guests, which are always a little interesting and sometimes nerve-wracking for me. So, and also I want to know how I can make this show better and what other stories you would like for me to explore. Send me an email at tnevins@clickplacement.com and let me know. And Derek Loudermilk, this guy is traveling all over the world, and he's got a podcast called The Art of Adventure. He's written a book that's just gotten picked up by a large publication, and he's figured out a way to live the digital nomad life in places like Bali and Spain and Australia and Vietnam. And he is, or was when I recorded this, 4 days away from getting on a plane and heading to Croatia. But the kicker with this is that him and his partner, Heidi, are doing this with now a 5-month-old baby. So no excuses. They have an infant, and that is not going to slow them down. So they are living the digital nomad life and headed to Croatia. When this is published, they will be there. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Thanks. Derek Loudermilk, thank you for joining me today on the show.
Todd, thanks for having me.
And we've got to start quick by thanking Kelly J. Law on Twitter for putting us together. And her symbol is Kelly, KELLI_J_Law. Kelly, thank you.
Yeah, it's totally wild to, in this global world, to just be connected. And obviously I think it's going to be a great fit. So I'm excited that these things can happen.
Definitely. Cool. All right. What city are you in? What is your view? Like, what are you looking at?
Yeah, currently I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. And
Really?
We are in Webster Groves, which is a suburb. It used to be, back in the 1800s, the weekend getaway. It's 5 miles away from downtown St. Louis, not very far, but people would come out here and enjoy the orchards and the groves. And now it's just, a central part of the suburbs.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with St. Louis. I love it. I grew up about an hour and a half from there up in Illinois.
Oh, perfect.
So how old are you? Are you married and do you have kids?
I am almost 34. My birthday is in a couple of days.
Okay.
I've got a 5-month-old son, and my partner and I, Heidi, we are not married, but we met in Bali, Indonesia.
Okay. What is your profession?
That's a good question. I actually try to wiggle out of that question whenever someone at a networking event asks me, or I'll just take some part of what I do. Sometimes I say I'm a podcaster or a teacher, or sometimes I say I'm an author, but a lot of the times I'll come up with some, made up thing like I live off the land, or I'm a professional adventurer, or, I just sleep on people's couches or or whatever. Because the point of the question is, they just want to know about you. So I just try to get past that as soon as possible and start telling stories.
That's okay. All right. I think I'm going to take that. I'm going to use that as well. You've visited 27 different countries and all 50 states, but living in a foreign country is a totally different story. How many countries have you lived in, let's say, longer than 6 months?
So longer than 6 months. I've lived in Indonesia and Australia for more than 6 months. I actually have this quest that I'm working on, which is to live in every continent for 3 months or more. And it kind of lines up well because a lot of times visas are 3-month visas. And so I lived in Spain for 3 months. I lived in Vietnam for 3 months. And I feel like that's a good amount of time to get to know a neighborhood. You start to make friends. And then, then it's time to go again. But, so yeah, the goal is go to every continent for 3 months and then decide where we want to live more permanently.
Interesting. Have you ever had a 9-to-5 job in the United States?
Yes, I have had 3, and I've been fired from 2 of them because I'm a terrible employee. And this is part of the reason, I, to put it in your terms, pulled the ripcord. I didn't know that I was a bad employee. I thought that some jerk was just firing me for no reason or whatever.
Okay.
One job I lasted 5 weeks. That was my first job. And I only got the job because the CEO of the company was friends with my girlfriend's parents. And I just met her parents and beat them at Scrabble. And so they said, if you can beat us at Scrabble, then you have to be smart enough for this job. Well, that's not actually a good qualification for interviewing someone. If you're hiring someone, do not base it off of a Scrabble skill. So I was trained as a scientist. I have an undergraduate degree in biology, but I am really not detail oriented. And this job was just detail all day long, doing lab experiments and taking notes. I would probably write 600 to 1,200 different notes, and they had to be legally accurate because the product was a testing laboratory. So I had that job twice. I got fired from that job, and then I was managing a laboratory. I got myself hired to manage a laboratory, which interestingly is the exact same job that my father has currently. So we were working the same job for competing companies. And again, terrible job for me. Every once in a while, I would get to talk to customers, and I would bring in like $50,000 of new business, but they didn't switch me over from the laboratory side to the sales side or anything like that. They just they just kept me on that, and I kept making mistakes, obviously, because I can't keep track of 600 different things. I mean, someone really loves that, I'm sure, but it's not me.
Right.
So anyway, again, the 2008, depression rolls around, and I'm the first to be let go.
All right. So was that your last 9-to-5er back in 2008?
Yeah, that was pretty much the end of trying to work for someone else.
A lot of the people that I talked to, actually, that time frame impacted a lot of people in a lot of different ways. It impacted me personally. That was one of the motivations behind my wife and I pulling the ripcord in 2010 and heading out of the country for 5 years. So it's interesting how that impacted a lot of people, whether it was positive or negative. The layoffs came and it caused a lot of people to reevaluate what was going on. So you are very much educated, if that's a correct way to say that line. You're very educated. You've got a master's degree in biology. Is that right? Microbiology?
Microbiology.
You discovered a virus in the boiling acid hot springs of Yellowstone National Park that may represent one of the most ancient forms of life. What does that mean?
Yeah, this was something that I've always wanted to do, was discover a new species, and started in my backyard as a kid, looking under rocks to see if there was anything. And obviously I had no idea whether I was discovering something or not. But I made lots of notes, made lots of discoveries in my yard. And I've always loved Yellowstone. It's a totally unique, weird landscape. And so I said, I'm just going to go study in Yellowstone, and I'm going to look for extremophiles. Extremophiles are microorganisms that live. There's my accent coming out.
Nice. I like it.
In extreme conditions. So either in ice or boiling acid, or in the Dead Sea, for example. They're adapted to the most extreme ranges of life on Earth.
Okay.
And this, if you say, okay, what is the extreme of what life can withstand on Earth? Then if we look at other planets, then we can say maybe there's life here. So there's moons of Saturn, or they're looking for life on Mars. And that helps teach us where to look based on what the extremes are on Earth. And so the theory is that life evolved on Earth early on in the oceans, when there was lots of volcanic activity and it was really hot and there wasn't any land animals or anything like that. And so that's what I was looking for. I was looking for some very simple forms of life. Viruses are the most simple forms of life. They're just essentially some genetic code inside of a protein shell, like an M&M. And I ended up spending lots of time looking under the microscope from the samples I had taken from the hot spring for something that looked like life, which is subjective. But I started seeing these patterns, and eventually I discovered a soccer ball shaped virus that had never been seen before, and we ended up sequencing the genome, and it's unrelated to any known species, and it lives in the boiling acid hot springs, and it could be one of the earliest forms. It's just stayed around in the hot springs for millions of years.
Incredible. And we're going to hit your bucket list that you have on your website, and certainly discovering a species is one of them that has been marked off. That's impressive. You've spent a lot of it's not cheap, and it's super time consuming to get a college degree, let alone a master's degree. Did you ever consider quitting and jumping into the digital nomad traveling life earlier than what you did in 08, 09?
Yeah. So luckily in sciences, if you want to get a PhD or master's degree, the school will pay for it because you're doing research. So you're giving them payment in your time and working on these projects. So luckily the degree is sort of given to you,
okay. But
the time commitment is costly, and to become a professor takes decades, and it's a really tough road. Yep. You go through a PhD, 7 years, and then you go through some postdocs, and then you try to get tenure as a professor, and eventually 20 years later you're in charge of your own career. And it's a really long timeline.
Were you heading in that direction?
That's where I thought I was going. Yep.
Yeah. How do you make a decision when you were 24 that like, okay, I know what I'm going to, the next 2 decades of my life, or when you're 20, let's say, next 2 decades of my life, I'm going to commit to this and be a professor. I can't imagine that.
Well, the way I did it was, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Basically,
Okay.
I was decent at understanding biology, not obviously decent at I was good at doing benchtop science. It's actually not very hard to be good at that. I think that I could train your average high schooler to do what I was doing within 3 weeks, because mostly it's just being skilled at the various machines that you're using. You might not even fully understand how the underlying, biology and chemistry of the process is working, but you could actually do good biology very quickly.
Okay.
And so that's another reason why I thought that the job was too easily replaced by robots, or a job that you can train someone to do in less than a month is too easily replaced, in my opinion.
Sure.
So it's a little bit risky. Many things obviously led me away from science into becoming a digital nomad.
Yeah.
And partly it's it's just the long struggle, the funding struggle. In the US, science funding has been going downhill, so the competition is just getting more and more fierce. Even the top scientists are not getting funded, so you're competing against the best of the best for a small piece of the pie.
So 2008 rolls around. You get fired again, which is probably like a super big blessing in disguise. What was your plan? You just said your dad has had his career going for his whole life, and you get fired in 2008. What was your game plan at that time?
Well, let's see. So let me try to make sure this timeline is accurate, because that's when I decided to go to grad school. That's when a lot of people went to grad school. And I think I started grad school in 2010. So I was unemployed, racing bikes, as a professional cyclist for a few years. And that's a whole nother story. So my first career essentially was also professional cycling. And I also pulled the ripcord on that, knowing that all pro athletes retire at some point, and it's usually about 35 or 40.
Yep.
And then I would hate to have to reinvent a career at 40 without some more credentials or skills or education. So I decided to just be an amateur and race casually the rest of my life and focus on education, which is sort of what led me back to grad school. Moved to Montana to be next to Yellowstone, and then spent 3 years before I pulled the ripcord again and got out of grad school.
So, all right. So you got out of, and then what set you on the path of Vietnam? Spain, you were racing, you went over there to cycle. And, but you've been in Vietnam, Bali, Australia, and we're going to jump into this in a second, but you're on your way to Croatia. So what motivated you to I'm going to leave the US and I'm going to just go travel and start your company, The Art of Adventure?
I think a lot of people read 4 Hour Workweek, and he makes it seem so simple that you think, I can do that. And we spent a lot of time, my ex and I, who we had this plan, we wanted to travel the world. And we said, okay, to make this happen, we need to come up with some business that is going to earn us a minimum amount of money. If we travel in Asia or South America or Africa, it's pretty cheap. So we decided we needed $1,000 a month of income to sustain travel, that our budget would be less than $1,000 a month each. And for most of the time, my budget's been about $800 to $1,000 a month.
For how long? How many years? Since
last 4 years.
4 years. You're living off of $1,000 a month or less per person.
Yeah.
All right, man.
So it's eminently doable, and it gives you a really long runway to start businesses, to learn things, to explore when you have that kind of leeway. And so the companies that we started, my first business was a cycling coaching business. I was teaching collegiate racers how to become professional cyclists. Okay. And my ex started a food blog that she was selling ads on the food blog. And that was enough to convinced us, okay, it's good enough to go ahead and move to Vietnam and start things off.
So, but you were teaching collegiate athletes from afar. Like, how are you teaching them to do something physical when you're physically not there?
Yeah. So cycling, there's some things that you can learn while riding with an athlete, which is always great when you can be in person. But most of what I was doing was prescribing training for them to do every day. They would know what training they would do. And then we would talk about the racing strategy and the tactics to help them win races. So we would hop on the phone once a week to talk about the training and to talk about upcoming races and strategy.
All right. Okay. So you started then from there. It seems like it morphed into you starting the Art of Adventure podcast. You started that September 2013. Was there any other form of income that you had other than your coaching back in 2013?
No, not really. Just some minor investments that weren't really enough to be sustainable.
Okay. What was your motivation to start the Art of Adventure podcast?
This is also a very structured scientific decision. I did learn some things from science about how to come up with a hypothesis, and some of the details stuck with me. So some of the things that I really value, my main values in life, are curiosity and learning, but also teaching and interacting with people and helping people. And I wanted a business that would have a product that was infinitely replicable. So information-based businesses, podcasts, books, online courses were very appealing to me. And podcasting had the lowest startup cost. I had some mentors, Lewis Howes, John Lee Dumas, that were becoming successful in the podcast realm. And it made sense to test it out. And it's very low stakes to test a podcast, see if you like it. It turns out I really enjoy interviewing people. I love talking to people, and obviously, you're doing the same thing. You get to meet people you otherwise might not.
Yeah.
It wasn't clear how I was going to monetize it, but it was clear to me that it was a good direction to go in.
You are 161 episodes in now. I listened to number 158 with Dale Thomas Vaughn, and he talked about how entrepreneurs sometimes feel invisible and the pain of it. And he helps them get a bigger brand to brand out. I mean, help me out with this, because you talked to him, but have you ever felt invisible as an entrepreneur or as a digital nomad? And what did you take from that conversation with Dale? I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, that's a good question, Todd. And Dale's been on this show, my podcast, a couple times, and he's a really awesome guy.
Yeah.
And he helps people get featured in on TV, major national media, which is something that people forget about. All these online entrepreneurs are trying to use social media, this free social media, and we're always on Facebook and Instagram and stuff. And there's this big old world which is almost, I don't know, just traditional business and traditional media, which we've just sort of ignored and forgotten. I know a lot of coaches they're coaching entrepreneurs like myself, even when there's also a market for executive coaching and corporate consulting that I think we've forgotten. So it's a really interesting thing to think about in general. But there is so much noise, and we're all, those of us in the online space are learning from each other as we go. And so, we see someone do something cool and we model our marketing or our business after them. And it still ends up feeling like there's just a lot of noise to get through.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's the age-old problem. You have something that you want to sell, but getting it to the right people is always the problem.
You are 161 episodes in. I'm 46 episodes in. Which guest or which story from a guest have you thought of more than any others after 161?
Well, the best episodes end up being ones where I already know a lot about the guest, or we have very similar overlapping fields of expertise, so we can go really deep into a topic. So Chris McDougall, Born to Run. Yeah, I've been a runner for decades. We've both studied physiology and travel and journalism, and so that episode allowed us to really nerd out on the evolution of the human body for running and all these cool things. A recent interview with the world's most traveled man, I did a ton of research beforehand and sort of understood all the things that he'd ever said online or anywhere, and then followed up on the questions that I was still curious about. And, as a traveler myself, that one went really well. It's potentially my best interview I've done. And simply because, I got him to open up about a lot of things that maybe no one's asked him before, personal questions, really getting into his feeling, trying to be more like Oprah, So that's cool. Now, as I have a little more experience now, and I start to care less about what people think, and I can just ask questions that might be dumb or outrageous or whatever.
What's the common element or common theme throughout all of your guests so far?
This is really interesting. I started the potential topics were broader, and it's narrowed down. And so most of my guests now are combining business and travel in some way. Mm-hmm. So it's either professional travelers or pro athletes that are traveling all the time, or it's digital nomads that started with the business so that they could travel. So we're really focusing on this growing niche of digital nomads and traveling families and people that want to really control their life schedule.
I find myself heading in that direction too. Even after 44, I feel up to this point I'm a little broad in regards to the stories and the guests, and I'm narrowing it into people like yourself, what we were and will be again in regards to just expat, digital nomad, location independent entrepreneur, whatever the title is. That seems to be the direction that I'm going as well. But that's interesting. I hadn't thought about professional athletes. That's true. They are constantly traveling as well. Who have you interviewed so far? I'm assuming cyclists would be.
Well, I guess these days it's more actual adventurers, people that explicitly say, I'm going to, go on adventures full time. So people like Dave Cornthwaite, for example, with Expedition 1000, his mission is to go on 25 trips of 1,000 miles or more, each with a different type of non-motorized transportation. He's a British adventurer.
I have a couple of athletes that I've interviewed. Two of them are runners. And then Mike Lewis, who is starting a company, When to Jump, which is actually being helped out with the Huffington Post and Ariana Huffington. But Mike was in the venture capital world in Boston and quit to join the professional squash tour and traveled all over wherever squash is played and did that. And now he's documenting what he learned and writing a book and building a community around his travels. So, okay. All right. Yeah. And I've got, I interviewed Bill Sykalik, who quit his normal consulting job in New York City to run all 52 of the U.S. national parks in 1 year, run a marathon in every national park. Yeah. So he just did the Dry Tortugas. He's about 40 in. So we actually, he rolled through, Austin, Texas here a couple of months ago, and we went out for a run, and I met him for the first time, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah. Very cool. So
actually I want to comment on that if I may, about physical challenges and physical activities. The balance between learning business and learning a new culture and learning a physical activity, they're all skill acquisition problems, but they're all a little bit different. And so I think it's really valuable to try sports or athletics or physical adventures to inform the way that you approach the running a business, because you're willing to try things on a sports field. You're willing to screw up and fail and laugh about it. And people that don't have the sports background in the business world, they take it so seriously, and it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a kind of like a game. You're trying things. Sam Walton built pyramids of Tide detergent outside of his stores to see if they would sell, because it's fun. And that was part of why Walmart took off, because they were having fun. And so I think these different realms of skill acquisition have great crossover.
As you were saying that, I remember a quote from Wayne Gretzky. As an athlete, if you're not falling down, you're not trying hard enough. And you're right. A lot of times, and luckily now in Austin in the startup world, and so failure is looked at as a positive, and that hasn't always been the case. But it's nice to be in a startup environment where failing is just part of it. You're gonna fail and just keep failing because eventually you'll get it right. So, but that is interesting, the correlation between athletes, because they're exposed. They're visible, they're transparent, people are watching, their families are watching, and all of that. And if they screw up, everybody knows about it. And certainly now they're getting hammered on social media and all of that stuff. So they're willing to risk it all. That's a great correlation. All right. So you're living on under $1,000 a month. You do coaching, you do consulting, you've written a book. Where does the majority of your income come from to fund your travels? Yeah.
So my coaching program, has evolved. It went from cycling coaching to podcast training. Wherever I was teaching groups of people to launch podcasts. And then people started asking me questions about business, how I ran my coaching business or the podcasting or all these things. And because I had interviewed so many entrepreneurs, started business coaching a couple years ago after giving away lots of free coaching. Sure. And that's become the main income stream. And so at any given point, eight clients would be full for me. That's about as much as I would take on at a time. And I do year-long programs for people basically to go from nothing, no business idea, or maybe they have a few business ideas, but they're not sure which one, to making a product, getting it launched, and starting on their travels themselves. So then I can have friends to hang out with, more digital nomads.
Exactly. That's a great business model. They're clients, and then you're creating friends and clients and people to travel with. Okay, so in your bio, you write something that struck me: to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You're a methodical thinker. So when you go into it, let's talk about Croatia. What research have you done on Croatia? And I'm assuming you do this every time you're jumping into a new spot. What are the steps that you go through before you land? Yeah.
So we're four sleeps away from boarding the plane to Croatia. We researched it enough to know that it was a good living environment, not too big. We're going to this town called Zadar. It's 35,000 people. It's on the coast. Nice beaches, nice climate, nice people, nice food, not too expensive. There's co-working. So we knew enough about it, but I also purposely did not do a ton of research, because I'm usually guilty of over-researching things, and I want it to be a little more spontaneous.
Okay.
Now, as we approach, we're doing things like I'm finding a co-working space. We're looking for yoga studios. I play some ultimate frisbee, so I'm looking for a pickup frisbee game. Basically, I'm looking for opportunities where I can meet dozens of people all at once, so we can get some friends right away. Because it's really important to have a handful of friends that you meet instantly, and the best place to do that is through shared activities. So strategically networking in the first couple of weeks when you arrive at a place to build some community there is really important.
What is the co-working? I'm sitting in a co-working space in downtown Austin. I think the environment and everything is just awesome. I interviewed Johnny FD, who was in Bali. I interviewed him recently, and he is a major fan of the co-working spaces. How many of them are in Croatia, in Zadar, and is that a big scene? Is it a big digital nomad scene?
Yeah, I think there's just one in this town. And again, there's only 35,000 people in this town.
Okay.
But definitely in Zagreb or Dubrovnik, which are a little bigger, I think it's a big scene.
Okay.
They're having a TEDx talk in Zagreb a couple of weeks after I get there.
Okay.
Tried to become a speaker for that, unsuccessfully this time around.
Okay.
But yeah, they're definitely, on the near the cutting edge. Probably more so than places in Montana or some places in Texas, for sure.
What was your process to try to get on the TEDx talk?
Well, I knew I was going to Croatia, so I just looked up TEDx in Croatia, and there it was. And I said, And there was like one day left to apply, you know how it always is. And so
Wow.
I just put something together, and I actually got an interview. I made the final 30 or whatever for an interview.
Okay.
And, you know, the theme for the conference was building the future now. And I had just become a father. So I decided to frame my talk as sort of insight from studying digital nomads as advice to my son about the future and what he could expect. So I thought it was a cool topic, and I may pitch it to men's conferences as well, since I've already sort of written it out.
That sounds awesome. All right. So your major life event, you are a dad, you're 5 months in, but this isn't slowing you down, of course. Like, you are jumping on a plane 4 sleeps from now to head to Croatia. How have your, I mean, beside the obvious, certainly your priorities have evolved and changed, but it hasn't taken you off of your travels. How have you adapted that part of your life or your life to enable this all to happen smoothly with a 5-month-old?
That's a good question. And my friend was asking me what I have given up. And I've given up some fitness.
Okay.
And I've given up learning new things. So I don't learn as I used to just kind of read and learn for enjoyment, and now it's more focused. Like, if there's something I need to learn for the business, I'll do it. I still do. Sometimes I walk him around so that he can fall asleep at night, and I'm reading on my Kindle in a dark room while that's happening. But yeah, I think, you know, things have just simplified. I really haven't been to any parties recently. You know, I don't socialize as much. I think that's probably the biggest thing. So yeah, some of my life has just gotten simpler, I suppose. And in terms of travel, you know, we had to carry a lot more stuff. I lived out of a carry-on bag for years, and now I have a check bag. I have 3 times as much stuff because most of it's, you know, diapers and whatnot.
And Frisbees, do you travel with those?
Oh, I gotta travel with a Frisbee.
Okay.
I'm debating on bringing the cleats. If I do find a game to play, you know, give me that edge.
There you go. Exactly. Okay, so when you get to Croatia, do you already have a place, an apartment, or are you house sitting? Where are you going to stay?
Yeah, we've got a place for a few days, and we'll do house hunting.
Okay.
For a long-term rental, and we'll probably get a 2 or 3 bedroom place so I can have an office, and then we can host. A lot of times, clients will come stay with me for a weekend or a week to work on things.
Okay.
Or friends and family will come visit, so we like to host. So getting a 2-bedroom place is key.
Crucial. How much will that cost?
I think a nice modern place will cost about $800 a month.
Ooh, that cuts into your budget a lot. If your budget is $2,000 a month, roughly, with 2 people, yeah, $800 a month US. Okay.
Yeah, so it's still doable. I mean, you say spend $400, $500 a month on food, you're still about $2,000 a month. Do
you live less than 30 days in the US? So what do you do for healthcare?
I have US healthcare, and we also have travel healthcare.
Okay. All right. Jump into your bucket list. How many are on there? You've got over 100, and you've got 113, and a number of them are crossed off. One of them jumped out. You've set a world record. What is that? What'd you do?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I should probably describe a little bit more on the list. The world record is for climbing Bali's 3 largest volcanoes back to back to back. And this was a previous record that had been set a few times before, and the time had been coming down slowly. And we put together a team of largely friends that I played Frisbee with and runners in Bali to really smash the record. And the record was at 19 hours, and we said we were going to do it in 15 hours.
Whoa.
And so there's 3 volcanoes. Most of them are between 10 and 12,000 feet tall. And so we started in the middle of the night with the first one. So the first one's all in the dark. The second one's totally exposed in the blazing sun. And the third one is in the rainforest, and it was raining. And so there's actually this really interesting thing that happened, which is, I think, why we were able to set the record. We ended up setting the record. Obviously, because we're talking about it now. So we start at midnight. We arrive at the bottom of the first mountain at midnight, and you pull up to the parking lot. The parking lot's empty. Obviously, no one's there. It's a temple where the trailhead is. Bali is an island that has a strong Hindu tradition that's a little bit different than Indian Hindu. It's very spiritual. A lot of it's just a really interesting spiritual tradition. The rest of Indonesia is Muslim, so it's the only Hindu island in the whole nation of Indonesia.
It's interesting. Okay.
So we get to this temple, and this is the main temple of Bali, the biggest. They call it the Mother Temple. And we get there, it's midnight, and we have to walk around back behind the temple where the trail starts. And as our guides arrive, because it's an active volcano, so you have to have the guides.
Okay.
They're excited. We don't expect any problems. We walk around the back of the temple, and there are 10,000 people already on the trail.
10,000? Oh
10,000.
God.
Yeah, it's just a huge mass of people. There's a huge line to get on the trail, and all the way up the mountain is this string of lights.
Yep.
Right, and it's just a single track trail, and these are not speed record of people. These are grandmothers and babies and priests carrying chickens and pigs and goats and all kinds of things, because what they're doing is they're going to the top of the volcano to have a ceremony to start rainy season. And this is like a secret thing that even our guides who are locals, they had no idea this was happening on this night. And so we get there, and we have no choice but to just get in line and just meander our way slowly up the mountain with, people are hiking this huge jagged rocks in flip-flops and khakis or whatever they're wearing.
Right.
And right away we think, this is so slow. We are never going to set the record. And so the first volcano took us, I think, 6.5 hours or something to go up and down. It was sunrise at the bottom, and all of the worshipers were coming down at the same time, and they were like, "Hey, you crazy people, like, come take photos with us." And of course, these priests in their religious garb, and we're like, "Yeah, we want to take selfies with you guys." And so that was really cool, just getting to sort of be part of this ceremony that probably no Westerners have seen, or there's no way you would find out about it.
No way.
And so in fitness, in all kinds of things, if you save yourself, if you stay fresh, you can actually go much faster. And so that's what happened, was that because we went slowly on the first one, we had a lot of energy for the last volcano, and we were really racing up that one. And we ended up setting the record in 14 hours and 43 minutes.
You crushed it.
Yeah.
14:43?
14:43. And
versus 19.
Everyone was still happy and fresh and excited at the end of it. And it started raining.
The
very last one. So the priest, the ceremony, it worked.
Did it.
Like, rainy season started. It started raining, and it rained for 6 months.
Whoa.
Yeah. Right. Like, wow.
That is an incredible experience. The world record is like one piece of a awesome situation. That is super cool. Wow. Jumping back to the podcast, because obviously that's what we're on, and I'm having a blast with it. Obviously, what are you aiming for with the podcast for the next 12 months, let's say?
Well, I'm starting to talk to the top 15 or 20 travel podcasters in the world, and I want to aggregate all of us into a network.
Okay.
And for my show, for example, we get 1,000 or 2,000 downloads per episode, which by itself is, I don't know, worth a few $100s a month advertising.
Right.
But if you get a ton of people, some of whom have a lot more downloads than I do, we can get big advertising accounts from large corporations and then distribute that out among the shows.
Got it.
Plus we can start sharing, cross recommending each other.
Sure.
And so I'm excited about this model, and I think to make it work we just need a solid salesperson to go out and get the advertising revenue.
What does that look like though? It's a network with all of the podcasts on one specific network. Is that how it works? Or are you guys still all independent? Someone's on SoundCloud, the other one's on Libsyn. Like how does that structurally look?
Yeah, I haven't sorted out all the details. I think that most of the networks, they would have like a producer or a group that produces everyone's shows, so that they all have similar sound production quality and all that, and they would all be featured together on a same website. We each have our own websites, but then there'd be the community, the network website, so you can go and you can see all the shows and you can select and things like that. Okay. It's a relatively new model, but the comedians have done it successfully with Earwolf, and there's the Podcast One network, which I think is like a self-development network.
Okay. Man, I love it. Love it. That's awesome.
In general, people are pulling the ripcord. They try to become solopreneurs. They go out on their own, and we end up, lots of us are doing very similar things. So what I expect to happen is people will start aggregating around certain causes or certain niches. So if two people are both trying to start an online community around, someone was talking to me the other day about healthy eating or sugar, why not combine forces? Why not have co-founders and work together rather than everyone doing a solo project? So I think that's what I'm interested in doing in the near future with podcasting, and also with the rest of the business I'm doing, because other people that are similar, I think it'd be a lot of fun to work with people.
That's super cool. All right. You can find Derek at DerekLoudermilk.com, and then on Twitter and Instagram at Derek Loudermilk, and on Facebook, Dr. Loudermilk, and the podcast, The Art of Adventure, and a new one, Uncharted Family.
Yes.
And your book. All this will be in the show notes. Conductors, the Orchestrate the Next Big Thing. We didn't have time to talk about that, so we got to have another podcast episode, man. We got to do it.
Yeah, that's the book is really exciting. Actually, it just got picked up by an international business publisher. So I was planning on self-publishing it, but we did a sort of pre-launch campaign for the book and basically proved that it's a viable book concept. So 15 or 16 publishers sort of pitched me to sign with them, and I picked one, and so it's going to be a traditionally published book where it goes into bookstores and is published internationally, and I won't make very much money from it, but it'll get out there, which is cool.
Why will you not make very much money off of it? Would you make more if it's just an ebook versus a paper hard book?
Yeah, because the publisher is taking the risk of publishing tens of thousands of copies and marketing it. The writer, the author, only gets 10 to 15%.
Okay. So
if you self-publish, you're getting, 80%.
Okay.
So it's a lot more.
But you're using
reaches
the leverage of theirs, their reach, their leverage. Interesting. All right. That will be in the show notes as well. All right, Derek, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, Todd, it's been a pleasure. It's been a fun conversation.
Don't forget to hit up the rock stars at printdirtcheap.com. Use promo code GoHuntLife for $10 off of your next print job. For fast, cheap, and high-quality online printing, it's printdirtcheap.com. Hey, Life Hunters, thank you for listening to this episode of Go Hunt Life. If you like the show and would like to support it, go to iTunes and do this. Subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and review it. It helps. And thank you. If you or someone that you know has quit their normal life to follow their dreams, I would love an introduction and maybe interview them on the show. You can find me at GoHuntLife.com and also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest at Go Hunt Life. Until next time, stay weird, dare greatly, and ripcord out.